Welcome to Jazz Zone Together, our online jazz community where we will provide jazz education resources, interviews with jazz educators, artists, and celebrities, along with valuable tips and repertoire suggestions. Today, we are very excited and pleased to welcome one of the nation's most in-demand trumpeters, Wayne Bergeron. Wayne's stupendous trumpet chops and stylings can be heard on motion picture scores, top artist albums, and big band albums. Now I'll turn the mic over to Dinck Dunscomb to conduct the interview with Wayne. Dick,
thank you, Bob.
Take it away.
Thank you, Bob. Hey, this is going to be fun. I'm telling you, you have been a hero of mine, and I know Bob's too, throughout the years. And to the viewers, it's just simply you're the best of the best.
Well, so, thank you very much for that. My mother used to say that too. So you have to raise your standards, though.
And on top of it, a really nice man. So we would like to start with your beginnings. We know that you were born in Connecticut and relocated early to Southern California. Share with us some of your interest in music and what has led you to this substantial career as a trumpet performer.
When I was young, my parents moved to Los Angeles when I was about 10 months old, so I don't remember too much about Hartford, Connecticut. But so I'm basically a Southern California native. But when I was really young, my sister, I'm the youngest of six, and they always told me that I was always interested in music. Like when even when I was very young, I would take a dinner plate and a knife and I'd put it on it like it was a phonograph. And then I would dance around. So I guess I had some kind of I loved music even, from as a young child. And when I was, 7 or 8, I remember my mom buying me a little, they're called Magnus chord organ. You get it at the drugstore. And it had the chords, you had some major chords and minor chords on the side, and then play by numbers, and I remember having that. I remember playing, you push this chord. And I remember, I still remember that's kind of funny, I never went on to be a keyboard player. And then my sister could play a little bit of guitar, and I learned to play guitar a little bit at an early age. Not very good, I learned enough chords to play at church, and you go ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. I knew like 7 or 8 chords that were perfect for the hymns. And I didn't become interested in playing brass until he was 11 and a half or so. My brother, my brother was a marching instructor for a drum and bugle corps. And so he would basically be babysitting me. So while they were working on their field show, I'd sit on the sidelines and watch them. And that's how I became interested in doing this. If you've read my bio, I started on French horn. So it was I started on French horn bugle. I became part of the cadet corps, the beginning corps. And I had no natural ability whatsoever on this, but they looked like they were having fun out there. And so I became interested in doing it. I was going into 7th grade at that time. It was summer between 6th and 7th grade. And my parents decided to put me in public school because the Catholic school I was in had no band program since I'd showed some interest in this. So I got into public school, and I remember the band director there, who wasn't the regular band director, he was summer school band director. I fill out the paper. He goes, "Oh, you play the French horn?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I do." And he goes, "Well, do you have an instrument?" And I said, "I sure do." And I had this marching bugle French horn. And so he said, "What the hell is that?" And I said, "It's a French horn." He goes, "That's not a French horn." I go, "Well, they told me it was a French horn." He goes, "No, that's some kind of marching instrument. You won't be playing that in band here. You'll be playing a traditional French horn." So he showed me that. It looked very complicated, of course, and the bell was going in the wrong directions. Very, very poor design, in my opinion, since it's facing the wrong way. So I noticed right away that it sounded a little better on it. It was an easier instrument to play. And I got in a beginning band, and there was me plus 7 girls playing French horn in beginning band. I was the only boy. And anyway, to make a long story too long, uh, uh, my mom drove me into beginning band one day about 2 months into the summer program, and the police were there, and my band room had been vandalized, and all the instruments got destroyed, and the room was a mess. It was graffitied up. Early days of Los Angeles gangs, I guess. And and because we had so many French horn players and I needed trumpet players, they switched me to trumpet. So that's basically how I started playing trumpet. And interesting thing happened to me on the trumpet is even though I had no natural ability on the French horn, the first time I picked up a trumpet, because of the difference in the shape of the mouthpiece and stuff, I had some funny stuff like, I was just trying to play a note like this. I try to go, right, or something, and I went to pick up the trumpet and it went, and I was getting these kind of squeaky notes, didn't sound very good, But I remember my band director running over to the piano and going, "Do that again." And I do that again. He goes, "That's a double high B flat concert you're playing." I go, "Is that good?" And he goes, "That's very good for 12, or whatever I was at the time." So I had this little bit of natural ability on the trumpets. I had a head start on range, and that developed very quickly for me. So by the time I'd been playing the trumpet for a few months, my range is basically the same as it was when I was 12. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of range. I didn't have any musical ability, wasn't a natural at any of that, but I had the physical part of this, somewhat together, and it's probably why I kept playing, because I had this thing I could do that a bunch of other trumpet players couldn't do, even older trumpet players, because my band director would he'd bring in players from his top concert band and bring in a beginning band. He'd bring the trumpet players in. He goes, "Wayne, play double high C." And I go, "Whee!" And he go, "I have somebody to replace all of you. Get out of here." And he was a very good trumpet player himself, my actual junior high band director. My parents kept me in public school. And I met my real first trumpet teacher was this guy, Ron Savitt, who's still alive and retired, but still plays, and was a great all-around trumpet player. And I probably learned more from him and my high school band director than most teachers I had, because they helped build the foundation of kind of what I do. Today, my trumpet teacher in junior high, we worked on style a lot, like different styles of music, and he let me fend for myself on how to figure out the trumpet. He gave me things to play, but physically, I wasn't taught very well, so I developed a lot of bad habits. But musically speaking, he showed me stuff that's very relevant to what I do for a living today, because I play on movies and TV shows and things, and I never know what the music's going to be. I don't know what style it's going to be. It could be very classical. It could be jazz. It could be, sound like Louis Armstrong. It could be a number of things. And so he was showing me that when I was very young. So I was kind of pretty good at it, when I was a kid. I was ahead of the other kids anyway, as far as stylistic prowess,
That's a great story. Wow. I'm telling you, that's something. Well, there's just so many things I want to ask you. Let's start with this. As a 20-something trumpeter, you became a member of the most renowned of big bands of that time, Maynard Ferguson. Tell us about those years and projects the band created, as well as your special relationship with Maynard.
I actually got called to play with Maynard that was 1986. I joined the band. And I actually got called in 1984. I was on the road with the soul singer, this guy, Bobby Womack. And I was in London. I get a call from the bass player, Bob Wackerman, at the time, who I've been a friend of mine since we were kids. I've known them since 1971. Matter of fact, Bob Wackerman, I just played the memorial for their father the other night, who was one of the greatest educators in Southern California ever. Yeah. Chuck Wackerman, if you know who that is.
I do.
And his sons all great musicians, Chad and Brooks and Bob and John. So anyway, they called me and I couldn't do it, and I was so bummed, that because I was, and I kind of like, to be honest with you, that's not the music I was even listening to anymore, Maynard stuff. I mean, in high school, I was very influenced by, but I'd kind of gone another. I still liked it and appreciated, but I was listening to other things. I was listening to Count Basie, and I was kind of more into the real hard swinging bands, Ellington's band and Basie's band and Woody Herman's band. And Basie's band, really, that was kind of where my soul is to this day. I wish I could have played with Count Basie, you know. But anyway, so I turned it down, and they'd hired another trumpet player, and I guess he didn't work out. They let him stay on for a tour, you know, and so in 1985, end of the year, I got a call to go out again on the 1986 beginning of the year tour. And I said, oh, good. I was living in Huntington Beach, California at the time. And I said, yeah, of course, I'd love to do that. And I started in January. My very first gig with Maynard was at like a big jazz conference. So it was all this pressure on me, you know, but very fun. But a funny story about meeting Maynard for the first time. I'd seen him play a bunch of times, but they'd sent me the book. They mailed me the music and a couple of cassette tapes of the band playing, just so I could familiarize myself with it before the first rehearsal in January. And I was living in an apartment at the time, so I'd go over to local Golden West College, and I'd go over there at night, and I'd go find a stairwell in one of the buildings and bring a music stand, and I'd practice over there, you know. And anyway, I kind of learned this stuff pretty well, and there was a couple of, you know, difficult things that I wanted to make sure when I got there I really nailed, you know. And so we were in Ojai, where Maynard lived, and first rehearsal, and we're kind of milling around. And Maynard had just had hernia surgery at the time, so had only been back playing a couple of weeks. And he came in, and it kind of hit me, you know. I didn't think much about it, but I go, wow, oh man, there he is. Oh my God, there's that guy that did all that stuff I was listening to, you know. And all of a sudden, I became very starstruck, you know. And he came over and introduced himself to me, and he said, well, let's get going. And we started, and we played a couple of tunes, and then we played this one tune that had this horn solo in it that had a little moment for me. And it was this thing called Central Park, and it a cappella horn section solo, you know, with some technical stuff. And it ended on double high C, had a little thing that went, right? So I play this thing, and I go, okay, I'm going to play this, man. I'm going to show him, you know, and he's kind of standing in front of us, and I play this thing. It's probably the best I'd played it, you know, practicing it or ever. And I feel like, well, and then he stopped the band, and he goes, Wayne, right? And I go, oh, yeah. He goes, is that all you got? And I'm like, oh, man. And then he goes, I'm just kidding. Welcome to the band, you know. So it's kind of my first words with him were him messing with me. And I became very good friends with him on the road. I hung out with him a lot on the bus because Maynard could talk. And the other cats have been on the band for a long time, so they kind of avoid him, because if you got trapped by Maynard, you were going to be there for a while. You know, there's no escaping, because he liked to talk and he liked to tell stories. So I would sit up in the front of the bus with him, and I talk with him a lot about Stan Kenton Day and his youth and all that stuff. So I can fast forward, you know, that I wouldn't trade that experience on the band for anything, even though I was only on the band for a short amount of time, 6 months in '86. Then he'd gone to a smaller band, and my last gig was the Playboy Jazz Festival here in Los Angeles. So we said our goodbyes. But in 1987, they were in Berlin, and they were under contract for a certain size band for that gig. So they threw like the band I was in, they threw a band together for one gig in Berlin with some players I'd never played with. One of them being Steve Wiest, who played on the band before me. So I got to meet Steve at that job. And then they hired a trumpet player named Don Hahn from New York, who played with Maynard way back when, a really good jazz trumpet player. And then his sax player he was touring with at the time, Matt Wallace, and a sax player named Tim Reese, who played with him before. So we did this one-off gig, you know. I went to New York, rehearsed. We took a red eye to Berlin. Next morning came back. And so I played that one gig with him. Then in 1988, he put he was 60 years old that year. I thought he was 5 years younger than me at that time. It's hard to believe than I am now. But we did a 60th birthday big band tour. So I went out and I did a 2-month tour with that. So I really only spent not even a year on the road with him total. And I ended up being on 4 recordings because the first week I was on the band, we went in the studio after we did 2 gigs. Then we went in the studio. We did Body and Soul. And then in '88, with that big band tour, we did a CD at the end of that tour. And then he started bringing me in, like if they would fire a trumpet player or something before that, or somebody had left, they'd record in Los Angeles. So they would just bring me in, and I would come in and play second trumpet and maybe play a little bit of lead, but just basically come in to fill in, you know. And then I did his final CD in New Jersey just weeks before he passed, actually. They brought a few of us alumni, Steve Wiest and I, and Dennis de Blasio, Ken Edwards, and Chip McNeil, and we were all brought in to augment his current touring band. So I ended up on 4 projects with him. And when a lot of people join these bands and hoping to get documented, you know, people would be on the road for 3 years and never get on a recording. And I was on the road for 8 months, and I ended up on 4 recordings, you know, just so, which is good, and just for, you know, history's sake. I'm very proud of that, of course, to be associated with him. And he always said very kind things about me. And like I said, I got to be friends with him. And he was kind enough to record a tune on my second CD with me, this thing called Maynard and Maynard. And, you know, he never got to hear the finished product. When I was recording with him in New Jersey, I had a rough mix of it, but he wasn't feeling well. So I didn't want to bother him. And, you know, we were just trying to get that record done. And so he never even got to hear the finished product on that, you know, unfortunately.
Boy, that's a history making scene. I'm telling you, just to be able to record all those times. And how important was he in the history of our big bands? I mean, he was one of the ones.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, you know, and he inspired. You know, he took kind of a different route, you know, as he had some commercial success.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were, you know, after they had a hit song, you know, with the Rocky theme, of course, then they kept chasing that. So I think musically, he went off track for a while. And that was probably on the recommendation of record labels and stuff. Hey, man, we did this. So they tried Rocky Disco 2, remember? And then they were doing Star Trek Disco. And they were trying to get another hit song, which never really happened for them, you know. A little bit, you know, but not really. And then he ended up going back to his jazz roots, of course. So I always thought that direction, even though the band was great and it was exciting. And I, you know, when I saw it, it was, you know, I thought it was great. But it would turn a lot of jazz purists off. So Maynard lost some audience, but he gained this new young audience that stayed with him. I mean, people that were my age when they were kids, they were listening to Maynard to the end, and very few band leaders can say that. You know, the others are kind of an acquired taste, where Maynard had this commercial success. So he always, even at the end, he drew a young audience, which is great for jazz, because if you can draw somebody in by being commercial, you know, there's a different thoughts on this. You know, jazz purists, you know, hate it. But I look at it like, you know, even Kenny G, I look at somebody like that. Well, if they draw somebody in, because the music's not too complicated and they can understand it, then maybe a young saxophone player that hears Kenny G, maybe they go buy a Stan Getz record, or, you know, and they get drawn into the music that way. So Maynard was kind of like that in a way, you know. But like I said, I wouldn't trade that time on the band for anything. For me, and you know, he was kind of the last man standing, with the exception of Ray Anthony, who's still with us. You know, and Ray, I mean, I played about 8 CDs with Ray Anthony, and Ray, I mean, even at 90 years old, still played great. Like that big sound, like Harry James, you know, could fill a room with sound, and pretty amazing. And he just had his 100th birthday, I think, recently. And still, you know, the joke was he was too mean to die.
Okay, so you performed and recorded with a who's who of big bands, but maybe none more exciting than the one you're in right now. Let's talk a little bit about your career with Gordon Goodwin's Big Fat Band.
Yeah, I met Gordon Goodwin in the 70s. There used to be a thing at the Hollywood Bowl called the Battle of the Bands, and high school bands and choirs and stuff would go through preliminary rounds. And if you made it to the finals, you performed at the Hollywood Bowl with your band. The bands that didn't make it, all those players could audition for something called the production band, which was a band that backed the singers and the choirs and stuff. Like, so you were like a house band, like a Las Vegas show band, right? And the second year I was in that, Gordon Goodwin was in that band. He played lead alto. And I remember Gordon went to Bonita High School. Gordon was a couple of years older than me, so I was a sophomore when he was a senior. But I remember his band was playing, his writing. He was writing charts for his band already, and I knew about him, and I'd seen him play a bunch. And then he was in this band. So that's when we actually officially met. And as the years went on, Gordon went on to have all kinds of success in writing for TV and cartoons, Animaniacs and Sylvester and Tweety and numerous things Gordon has written music for. And I wasn't really working for him. I hadn't seen him. And anyway, as the years went on, I got called to do something that this cartoon that he was the composer on. And I guess the regular trumpet players couldn't make it. And it was called The Cowboys of Moo Mesa. It's a very short-lived cartoon, but it was very Copland-esque kind of score, and in the writing. So I got to go and play it, and he said, I want this guy on all my gigs now, basically. So that's how our working relationship started. And then when he put a band together, the Big Fat Band was actually born from an IAJE convention that was held at the Disneyland Hotel. And Gordon was a musical director, and we put a big band together, and we had to do all Disney tunes, and we backed different artists like Kevin Mahogany and Maureen McGovern and Arturo Sandoval and a few others that I'm spacing on. But anyway, that was kind of the birth of the Big Fat Band. It lit the fire under Gordon. I'm going to just do this and get some of my stuff recorded. So he put a band together. It was basically that band, with the exception of a couple of different players, and we went into the studio, and never intending to be a band, just to record the music. But it ended up being a very successful thing. When we went out and did a gig to promote the record, we played at another IAJE convention, and it was kind of the first time people were hearing this band, and the place came unglued. And we're like, man, we got something here, And so that's kind of how that started. So 22 years later, here we are. We're into we'll be doing our eighth CD, I think. Coming up, and it's that band for me as a lead trumpet player. It's like driving a Rolls Royce, because I don't have to think about it. All I have to do is play the music. The band is so good. There's zero weak links in this band. Every chair is a top-notch, solid player. And so, and the band can kind of do anything. We could do a concert band piece, or we could do a jazz piece, or a rock piece, or a reggae piece, and respect it stylistically better than most bands could. So that's it's one of my very favorite things to do. Of course, we've been playing a lot lately as well. We played in Casper, Wyoming a couple of weeks ago, and we just played. Where the heck did we play? Oh, we played up at Yoshi's in Oakland the other night. And we have some more gigs coming up down the road here. So it's fun to get the band working. And we're going to be getting back to Japan at some point. I know that's on the work. We've been there several times, and to Europe. And it's a force of nature, that band.
Oh, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And by the way, I was at both of those first concerts that you mentioned. And it was amazing. Just still, it's exciting. Makes goosebumps on you.
Yeah, and I played with a lot. I played with Bob Florence's band, a lot of these bands, and they were all great. And and I loved playing with Bob Florence's band as well. But the impact that Gordon's band has on the audience, and once again, kind of like, even though Gordon's not completely commercial, we do some very commercial stuff and very different kinds of music, and it draws in that young audience. So our audience of high school and college. I mean, we played in Casper, Wyoming 2 weeks ago, like I said, and on Facebook, Gordon's wife, Angie, posted our last note before our encore of this crowd coming completely unglued for 10 minutes. We couldn't leave the stage. I mean, it was like I felt like we were rock stars, and what big band has that impact?
Yeah.
So it's really something else. And Gordon, aside from his great writing and all that, he's a great frontman. He's got the gift of gab, and he's a very articulate knowledgeable. So speaking to the crowd, and he knows how to draw them in and do all of that. So it makes for a good product when you have all those things lined up. This great band, great music, great front person. It all makes it part of the experience.
It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, Wayne, let's talk a little bit about Sammy Nestico. You've done recordings with him. What was it like working with him?
Well, I mean, like anybody else, anybody that's met Sammy Nestico, you fall in love with him instantly. And he is, I grew up, that's why I like Count Basie so much, because I grew up in the 70s, and he wrote in the late 60s and 70s, he wrote a lot for Count Basie. And all those classic charts, Basie Straight Ahead and Have a Nice Day and Queen Bee. The Queen Bee is the very first big band chart I ever played in junior high school, a watered down version, of course. And so I'd see this name, Sammy Nestico, and then I heard the Basie records and all Sammy Nestico, and I was like, and I loved this music, and my band director in high school loved that music. So getting to work with him later, of course, I remember the first time I worked for him wasn't actually a record for him. It was for a Mel Torme record that never came out because Mel passed away before it came out. And Pat Williams had done 2 charts. Bill Holman had done 2 charts. Sammy Nestico had done 2 charts. John Clayton maybe did a chart, and Mel Torme did a couple of the charts. And I was playing for Sammy there, and I never even got to meet him. He was just on the podium, and I was playing 4th trumpet and going, "This is so fun, man." There's that guy, And I ended up, as the years went on, I ended up getting on some of his recordings because I started working more and I was establishing myself in town here, and I got to do a few recordings with him. And I got to record this. I'll show you. This is my little, not to be braggadocious, but this is one of my little mementos from him. And I recorded this tune called Bustling that Ian McDougall from the Boss Brass actually wrote, but Sammy arranged it. And Louis Belson recorded it at one time. And Sammy always wanted to re-record it. So we did, and I got to play. It features the trumpet and the flugelhorn. So anyway, I recorded it on, I think, his my Sunny Side of the Street record we did. And then, so the first page of this, I asked him if he would sign it. And so he wrote that to me.
That's beautiful.
And so, talking about coming full circle, which is why I named my last CD Full Circle, because of things like this, Mm-hmm. And this is like, I'm more proud of this than anything. And I've done several other recordings with Sammy for different artists. I met Christina Aguilera. We did a Christmas record. And anyway, yeah, he's, when he left us, man, and he loved Gordon Goodwin.
Mm-hmm.
They were good friends, and Gordon loved Sammy, of course. They were good friends. Matter of fact, for one of Sammy's birthday parties, we surprised him. And somebody, I forget whose house we were at, but a big, giant house, big mansion. And we had Gordon Goodwin's band set up outside in this patio area. And Sammy had gone out to dinner with these people, and he was coming back, and they were going to come back and have a little cocktail or something and some cake. And we're playing. When he pulled up, they told him, we started Basie Straight Ahead, really soft. We're playing, and he thinks it's just a recording playing. And then they brought him out, and then they go, now, and then the band roared, and Sammy, like, he was crying, man. He flipped out. He just flipped out, that the band was there. And we played, about 7 or 8 charts or something, a little concert. And so, yeah, he's a big piece of my history and my, there's not a note I play that doesn't have what Sammy would want in it, So and I'm proud to say I got to be friends with him after seeing his name for all those years, So
that's so true. He was just a hero for everybody that was.
Oh my God, yeah.
And what
he wrote these charts for Christina Aguilera that were only 6 horns, 3 saxes, 2 trumpets, and trombone. And the voicings were so good. It sounded like there was 5 more people in there. And I remember Dan Higgins, a great lead alto player we have here, he's saying, don't tell anybody how you did this, Sammy. You know, you're putting people out of work here, you know, because Sammy, I mean, everything, his string writing, his concert band writing, there's nothing, you know, in his music has always got kind of like happiness in it. You know, there's like a joy to playing his charts. Even now, even the old charts, when I get to play one, I'm like, you know, I just want to do it for him, kind of, you know.
Brings so, a smile to your face.
Yeah, yeah. He was demanding, though, demanding person on the podium.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it wasn't right, you know, he would get a little bit fired up. You know, if something, if we here's, I'm just give you one little thing he said. Because we talk about, you know, when you hear band directors talk about when they're talking to their kids about when they're rushing, they always tell them to lay back, right? To lay back. And I never liked that phrase because when you tell kids to lay back, then they drag. And in Count Basie's band, for instance, you know, he said, I didn't really like what they did to some of my charts where they would back phrase so much. Mm-hmm. And I never really liked that because I just wanted to swing, you know. So I just found that interesting that like that wasn't really his call, you know, that, you know, if they would go, do that, you know, they would do that, which is cool as it was. He's like, yeah, I didn't write it like that. If I wanted it like that, I would have written it like that, you know. So I always found that interesting because I just figured that was his call.
So film and TV performances have been a tremendous part of your life. Discuss with us a little bit about that environment and maybe one of the projects that you were doing, like the West Side Story.
Yeah, I will tell you that playing in a big band and playing in a film scoring orchestra are equally great musically and equally challenging for different reasons. But being on a film scoring session, the pressure is much higher. It's not as relaxed of an environment. And it can be, you know, depending on like, you know, like The Incredibles and things like that. It's a little looser. It's jazz. And whenever jazz is involved, it always loosens up. But, you know, a lot of these things are very orchestral in nature and time is money. And, you know, the orchestra is costing them $45,000 a day, you know, or thereabouts or more. So when it hits 10 o'clock, bing, you can hear a pin drop. It is quiet. The contractor walks out and says, ladies and gentlemen, our composer day, da-da-da, the payroll will be ba-ba-da-da, turn in your paperwork by the end of the day. Here we go. And they go, hi, welcome everybody. Let's get some sounds. They hear everybody play a little bit. Here we go. 1M1, first cue. Here we go. Lights go dim in the room. Red light comes on. Click track starts. Click, 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 click. And we start recording right now, you know, and there's no wasted time. And then they talk about the strings. Okay, let's try this. They might modify a few things. And we'll get maybe 2 or 3 takes at it. And then we move on to the next thing. We never see that piece of music again. So that's how quickly it can be done. Now, it's not always that quick. Sometimes like John Williams will take his time, you know, because there's no budget restraints. You know, he'll just make, you know, he'll be tweaking the cello and the French horn and they might do 8 takes on a cue. But that brings a lot of pressure because that means, you know, they want to hear, you know, so it's great you nailed it the first 3 times. They want to hear that theme, whatever it was, the 13th time. It's got to be great as well. So it brings a lot of pressure. Fast forward to somebody asked me recently, what's the coolest movie I ever got to play on? And I used to say, well, building on the Incredibles movies, of course, because there's so much trumpet stuff in them, especially Incredibles 2. It's like, it's all about the trumpet, you know? So I had a lot to do in that movie. But more recently, the West Side Story movie has a very special place in my career and a feather in my cap and in my heart because one of my trumpet teachers, Yuan Racy, who played with the MGM orchestra that they used to have in Los Angeles way back in the day and played on thousands of movies, you know, including the original West Side Story movie he played first trumpet on. So getting to play that iconic music, sit in his chair, you know, and get to do that is another full circle moment for me. And I went to New York to do it because we with the New York Philharmonic. So there was it was quite a bit of pressure on me because here I'm in somebody else's backyard now, playing with their toys, like, you go into somebody else's orchestra, like, oh, why is he here? We got a lot of players in New York that can do this when, of course, they do, but for whatever reason, I'd also played this music live with the New York Philharmonic a few times, where they'd show how they show the film and you play the score live. I'd done it twice with the Los Angeles Philharmonic and twice with New York. So I was kind of a shoo-in to get to do this. So I got to fly back there 5 or 6 times, before the pandemic, and go sit down and play, but I felt very welcome, I have to tell you. So even though I was nervous, because John Williams is there, he's a music supervisor, and Dudamel is conducting, and the Bernstein family is there, and Rita Moreno is there. There's people very involved with the first movie are there. The greatest recording engineer that does all John Williams stuff, Sean Murphy, is there, scrutinizing every note we play. So it was high pressure, but I felt very welcome by the players there. They made me feel at home, and we had, I hung out with the trumpet. We went to lunch together during lunch hour, and we're all very, very cool. So that was really, really exciting for me. The only downside to that, and I hate this in our business, is there's no screen credit. So here the trumpet is a big part of this movie. Yeah. And I mean, most people know, trumpet musicians know who it is, and we figure it out, but the general public, they don't know. And the contract has changed since then, because now with large budget movies in our union contract, they have to give screen credit. Movies over a certain budget. And I could never understand why they wouldn't give us credit, but a lot of it had to do with when they, the end crawl, they call that, when the end credits are running, is already way established before music's done, and it's timed out, and adding another 50 names changes the timing of that. I think it's a horrible excuse for not including the musicians, but that's happening more now. So at least on more current movies and stuff, we get included. La La Land and things like that. I got listed, and what's the tune? Secret Life of Pets and things like that. I got some screen credit for it, so it's nice. So kids see your name up there, or people email, hey, I saw your name on this movie. It sounded great. They know who it is. So that's the one sad part about that movie, is I wish I had my name on there.
So Wayne, you're also active, very active, as a matter of fact, as a clinician and educator. And you currently are on the faculty at Cal State Northridge. So how would you guide young students as they prepare for the real world of music or life in general?
As far as musically speaking, what I encourage most students that I encounter to do is, I go back to 1971 or 70 when I was in the 7th grade, and my teacher telling me, be as stylistically diverse as you can be. If you want to work as a musician, if you want to be a star, if you want to be a jazz star, rock star, go ahead and pursue that, but your chances of surviving as a one-trick pony, unless you become a Miles Davis or a Freddie Hubbard and end up with some fame, are very unlikely. It's like landing a lead role in a movie, very unlikely. But there's a lot of extras that work in movies that make very good livings. They do a lot of things. They can do comedy. They can do dramatic work. And it's the same thing with being a musician, being able to be convincing at different styles of music, being able to sound like Harry James, and then maybe sound like Louis Armstrong, and maybe sound like a classical trumpet player if you need be, and be a lead trumpet player, and be able to do those things well enough to be convincing. And so when I'm working with students, we're working on style. I'll have them doing different things like that. The business has also changed since I started, with the technical things that have gone on with the age of sampling and sampled instruments. Orchestras have gotten, like Broadway pit orchestras, if you've seen them, getting smaller and smaller because they use sampled. It's sad, and we've also trained an audience to listen to music like it's canned, because it sounds canned now. Where back in the day, when you went and see Hello Dolly, not to date myself, but the orchestra pit rose up and you saw the heads of the orchestra and you could hear this orchestra play. Then they went back down and they played, right? And it sounded live. And now, a lot of shows, and musicians think it's great. They got them in another room. Oh, it's great. We don't have to wear tuxedos or all black or anything. But it's not great. It's how Las Vegas, they did the same thing there. They had musicians in lofts and places where you couldn't see them. And then when they started just pre-recording the music, nobody cared. And it just became pre-recorded. So all these musicians, a place like Las Vegas, there was hundreds and hundreds of musicians working in these shows. Every hotel had a show, and now none of that is happening. So it's kind of sad. So we have to prepare ourselves for a different environment. And if we can spread ourselves a little thin stylistically, maybe be master of all, jack of none, or jack of all, master of none. Yeah, that's the phrase. But be pretty good at everything. We have a chance to maybe do some work. So for me, it ended up in studio work, and because I live in Hollywood here, so that work exists. So I try to groom them for that. I also tell them to be technically understand, like doing what I'm doing here. I mean, I record things here and people pay me for my studio. Matter of fact, I'm recording Gordon Goodwin here tomorrow and Brian Scanlon, the sax player, because we're doing this this project, the music of Raymond Scott Reimagined, it's called. And this San Francisco String Quartet is doing this music with the Big Fat Band. Mm-hmm. So we're overdubbing solos on it. So they're coming here tomorrow, and I'm getting paid to be a recording engineer tomorrow. And so it's another way I can make some money. I always suggest they understand music copy work, being able to do music notation. And I also encourage them to be able to play the piano and compose. Because if you really want to make money, I mean, we don't start playing music to make money. We start because I love, something sparked me when I saw that Drum Bugle Corps, right? I wasn't going, boy, look at that marching French horn. I bet I can make some money doing that. That wasn't my thought, so I just love the music. So that's not why we start. But as we get into it, we realize that we have to do things to make money, and you can still pursue a dream to being a jazz player or whatever, but as a woodwind player, saxophone player, you might want to learn to play the flute and the clarinet. So you could do a Broadway show, because all those shows now used to have a flute chair. Now it's an alto, clarinet, tenor, flute chair. Maybe, there's 4 instruments that person has to play. So I encourage those kind of things to all different kinds of musicians. With bass trombone players, learn the tuba, be able to double on the tuba. Tenor trombone players being able to double on bass trombone. And that's here in Los Angeles, almost all the players double on those instruments, and very well, I might add, so, and it's the key to some success, I think.
That's such great advice, Wayne. So what's on your docket for the upcoming projects, and what are you doing next?
What am I doing next? Well, I'm building a recording studio in my backyard, as I mentioned before we went on the air. So I'll be getting that done and be doing more things back there. But I have a lot of regular shows I do. We just finished Animaniacs reboot, this cartoon series. We just did 2 seasons of that. We just finished a Mario Brothers movie recently. I did a record with the band Green Day last night. So these are all very stylistically diverse things, right? Last night we did a very orchestral in nature, like thrashing rock band, but with big, orchestral brass. And I do the show Family Guy. I've been a regular on that show for 10 years, and another TV show called American Dad. I'm on the Jeopardy theme still, and America's Home Funniest Videos, and so those have been kind of like regular things that have been around for a while that I do. In the near future, I got some more gigs with Gordon Goodwin's band coming up. I've got about half of a new project for myself in the works. I did an educational play-along app, the Wayne Bergeron Big Band app, and it's 12 Tom Kubis charts, all swing, because I find that young people don't understand swing. They seem to take to rock and straight 8 things better. So trying to teach them to be stylistically, be able to play this kind of music. So it's an app where you can eliminate the first trumpet and play along with this great band. Or you can take the first alto out or drums out. You can do all that stuff. So I have that, and I'm working on volume 2 of that. So I've got a lot of stuff in the works here. I'm busy um, doing lots of different projects and a
As
lot of guest artist things as well.
as
So,
we might expect, you are very busy. And I know I want to thank you for taking time out today to do this interview. It's been incredible.
oh no, it's just fun. I love doing this kind of stuff. So
I have one more request for you before we leave. Would you play a little something for us so our listeners can hear what you do on a daily basis?
I'll play some for you on my unwarmed up chops here, but we're just talking about what I was talking about. I'll give you a little. So if somebody asked me to play a song and like tenderly and said, "Play this like Harry James," I would probably play. Or Stardust, I would choose to play that like that, right? Or if somebody said, "Can you play something and give us a little Louis Armstrong?" It's a different kind of vibrato. It's a different sound, a little bit, Or if you wanted it to sound like something to sound like Chet Baker, when you get some air in the sound and understanding how to do those things. And I'm not great at all of them, but if somebody tells me to sound like these different things, I can go there enough to be convincing for a movie or something. I've had to do all of those things. Or just sounding, lead trumpet-esque, where you get that lead trumpet bravura kind of buzzy sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, those things that I think keep me working.
Oh, you are a gem. Thank you so much for this. This interview today has been priceless, and I know it's going to help a lot of people. And Wayne, you continue to be an icon in our field and my hero. Thank you.
Oh man, you just made my day, man. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to be here. Take care.
Thank you, Wayne. To our viewers, thanks for watching. We hope you gained some valuable insights from the interview. Please view our other interviews in this series to learn more about the interviewees and their contributions to music education.